You woke up this morning in a body that you've never been in before. Every cell replacing itself. The river of your form flowing constantly, whether you notice it or not. The person who went to sleep last night is not quite the same person who woke up. Science knows this. Buddhism has known it for 2,500 years. Heraclitus knew it too. You cannot step into the same river twice. And I would add, you cannot step into the same body twice either. Sickness, old age, death, and loss. These are not interruptions to life. They're the terms and conditions of having any type of form at all. Luckily, health, youth, love, and joy also have a role to play. And actually, the operative question here is, am I my body? Or do I have my body? The answer helps us to understand everything else that follows. So the question is not whether everything falls apart, because everything does. The question is, who's watching? And what, if anything, remains? Let's find out. Welcome back to Quantum Awareness. Sound is emptiness, emptiness is sound. We're here to explore the fascinating intersection of quantum mechanics, neuroscience, and Buddhist philosophy, or what I like to call the technology of meditation. I'm QP, your quantum preceptor. Now, before we go any further, if these conversations awaken anything within you, if you find yourself thinking about them after the episode's ended, please consider sharing one with a friend, or a like and a follow. It costs nothing, but it tells whatever algorithm is listening that more of this should exist in the world. And right now, I think the world needs more of this. So, thank you. Let's dive in. The second law of thermodynamics. Entropy increases, disorder grows, things fall apart. This is the arrow of time. The reason you cannot unscramble an egg. The reason your coffee goes cold. The reason the body you're living in right now is aging steadily, irreversibly, whether you want it to or not. The physicist looks at this and feels something close to grief, because the arrow only runs one way, toward dissolution, toward what cosmologists call heat death, the universe eventually becoming a cold, dark, uniform expanse where nothing happens, nothing changes, nothing remains that could be called structure or life or meaning. That's the thermodynamic worldview taken to its logical conclusion. Everything runs down, every form degrades, every candle burns out. The sugar dissolves in your tea and does not magically reassemble itself. The wave breaks on the shore and does not return to the sea as a wave. The body ages and does not grow young again. So, is that the whole story? Let's sit with that for a moment, because I think the physicist is describing something real. I think the second law deserves to be felt. Not just understood intellectually, but felt in the body, in the life. Sickness, old age, death, and loss are not philosophical abstractions. They arrive. They take people we love. They will take this form we're living in. So the question is not whether the second law is true. It is. The question is whether the deepest truth is available to us. The Buddha taught Anicca, impermanence, as the first mark of existence, not as a problem to be solved, not as a tragedy to be mourned, but the first thing to be understood clearly, without flinching. You see, everything that arises passes. Every form that appears dissolves. The body ages, thoughts arise and vanish. Relationships transform. Nations rise and fall. Even stars burn out. Same observation as the physicist, completely different relationship to it. Because Buddhism does not say impermanence is the end of the story. Buddhism says impermanence is a doorway. The passing of form is not tragedy. It's the very mechanism through which something deeper can be recognized. The form passes, but what watches the form passing? That's another matter entirely. So if we remember the big question from the beginning, am I my body or do I have my body? Now we can see that my mind has this body as a tool to bring benefit to others. That single sentence reframes everything. It's game changing. It's not, I am my body running down towards entropy, but my mind holds this body as an instrument. The craftsman and the tool are not the same thing. Tools wear out. They're meant to. A carpenter does not weep when a chisel dulls. He sharpens it, uses it fully, and when it can no longer serve, he sets it down. Sickness, old age, death, and loss are what happen to the tool. They're the instruction manual for impermanence, written into the body itself. The craftsman, awareness, mind, and Rigpa, that's what we're here to understand. The only good place to do this is in the laboratory of our mind, in meditation. First, by watching the impermanence of every single thought and noticing the aware space between them. The place from which everything arises and falls back into. Mental entropy, if you like. This space is not conditioned or put together of parts, and it cannot be destroyed. The space is empty of all of our confusion, but it's full of bliss. My Lama's Lama, Kala Rinpoche, one of the greatest meditation masters of the 20th century, the man whose transmission flows through the lineage that eventually is reaching you. Kala Rinpoche taught the dissolution sequence at death, with extraordinary precision. Earth dissolving into water, water into fire, fire into air, air into space, space into consciousness, consciousness into emptiness. Because it's empty, it does not die. 8 words, the entire teaching. But here's what the physicist standing on the riverbank with his thermometer does not know. We do not wait for death to experience this. We dissolve our form in every meditation. And this is not metaphor. In the completion stage practices of Vajrayana, the very structure of how we sit, how we settle, how we release, the elements dissolve. The solid, defended space of our body softens. The boundary between inside and outside becomes negotiable. The fixed sense of self, the one that thermodynamics is so worried about losing, begins to release its grip. To dissolve is lactong, or insight, or at the very least the door to it. Clear seeing. It's not something that happens to us. It's something that becomes possible when the conceptual scaffolding falls away and the ground is stable enough to hold the openness. Shine first, calm abiding, the settled mind, remembering the breath. Then the dissolution can occur without panic, without grasping, without the mind frantically trying to reassemble what has been released. A practice mind, a calm mind, meets dissolution as an old friend, as something rehearsed, as the most familiar thing there is. And then something even more extraordinary happens. The Lama dissolves into the student. This is the heart of Guru Yoga, the outer form, the teacher sitting before you in meditation. The voice, the presence dissolves. And in that dissolution, the mind of the Lama and the mind of the student are recognized as they always were. Water flowing into water. Not two things that have now merged. One nature that was never divided. This is lactong arising in the space that dissolution opens. Not before it, not around it, in it. So when Kala Rinpoche describes the elements dissolving at death, he's describing something his students have already rehearsed thousands of times, on the cushion, in the presence of the teacher, in the moment the Lama's form dissolves into them, and what was always true is simply recognized. The physicist calls dissolution entropy, the end of useful structure, the running down of the system. Kala Rinpoche called it the door. The same process. The difference is whether you've practiced walking through it. Once you've found the door, you're going to need some time to walk up to it and open it and examine it. That's called practice, patience, diligence. But once you do, well, That's another episode for sure. Way back in 2016, I wrote something about entropy that I want to come back to now, because I think it was pointing at something real. Even if I didn't have the language for it back then, the idea was this: all that energy that we use running toward what we want and away from what we fear, the constant friction of attraction and aversion, that is entropy in the system of a human life. Energy locked up, unavailable, lost to the endless battle of likes and dislikes. The Buddha called this suffering. If you ever ended a difficult relationship with someone, you know that the moment you finally give up, let go, forget, it's nothing but freedom. When that battle ceases, when we find that still point between attraction and aversion, that energy does not disappear. It transforms into what the Four Immeasurables calls equanimity, into what Kala Rinpoche called Daetong, the great joy that arises from emptiness, the bliss of the ground state recognizing itself. The thermodynamic ground state is maximum entropy. The system fully settled, nothing more to run down, the arrow of time having nowhere left to point. Physics calls this heat death, and finds it quite bleak. The meditative ground is also a maximum entropy in a sense. All the agitation of attraction and aversion has fully dissolved. There's nothing left to defend. The mind is resting in its own nature. Buddhism calls this liberation, and finds it joyful. Same destination. The physicist arrives there as a corpse. The meditator arrives there, if the practice matures, while still alive. Meditative entropy is not decay. It's arrival. It's the fourth immeasurable, lived from the inside. May they remain in the great equanimity, which is without attachment and aversion. That's the ground state. That's Daetong. That's what Kala Rinpoche was pointing at. Now, I want to tell you about a friend of mine. He was a yogi, not a monk. He died about 2 years ago. Misha loved Milarepa. In fact, he loved all of the Mahasiddhas. And I'm sure he knew this verse by heart. River, ripples, and waves, when emerging, arise from the ocean itself. He was my brother in Dharma. He ensured that I received so many important teachings as possible. And my many conversations with him about the Buddha Dharma form much of the content that we're sharing here. I hope you're enjoying. Misha's not gone. He arose from the ocean. He's returned to the ocean. And the ocean is not somewhere else. It's everywhere. Misha and I are entangled. I'll see him again in another life. I know this not as consolation, but as understanding. Such a Dharma connection is real. What was real simply does not stop. So this section's for him, my brother in Dharma, with tears and joy. Or, river, ripples, and waves, when emerging, arise from the ocean itself. In our last episode, we used the image of a river flowing into the ocean. Movement, transmission, one form becoming another. I want to use a different image now, because I think it goes deeper. The wave. The wave does not flow into the ocean. The wave is the ocean. It was never separate. The rising and falling of the wave is the ocean moving, expressing itself in form, temporarily, before returning to what was. When the wave breaks, nothing's lost, because nothing was ever separate to begin with. Your body is a wave. This life is a wave. The wave breaks. The ocean, awareness, the ground, Shi in Tibetan, continues. Not because something survived the breaking, but because separation was always the illusion. Now, I want to quote the great 16th Karmapa here. On his deathbed, he said, "Don't be bothered by death. Nothing happens." His wisdom here is so perfect for this moment. And C equals E equals mc squared completes its arc here. Energy conserved, form transformed, the circle running both ways with no beginning and no end. The physicist measures the wave. The contemplative dives in. Am I my body? The wave is not the ocean, and yet the wave is nothing but the ocean. The body is not the mind, and yet the body is the mind's instrument, arising from the same ground, returning to the same ground. Returning to the same ground is important here. I'll come back to that in a bit. Sickness, old age, death, and loss. These are what waves do. They're not what the ocean does. And here's where physics joins us one more time and says something that should stop us in our tracks. The Schrödinger wave function describes every quantum system before observation as existing in superposition, pure potential. Sound familiar? All possibilities simultaneously present, nothing fixed, nothing collapsed into a single definite reality yet. This is the mathematical description of the quantum ground state. Uncollapsed, open, prior to the arrow of time. And it sounds remarkably like what the Bardo teachings describe as the nature of consciousness when it's released from identification with form. You know, the fixed, defended, collapsed sense of self. I am this body, this name, this history, this particular wave. That's the classical level. The outer level. The measured outcome. The wave function has already collapsed into one definite reality. Underneath it, prior to it, is something that looks much more like superposition. Open, undefined, potential in all directions simultaneously. And here is the detail that matters most. Schrödinger's equation is time symmetric. At the quantum level before the collapse, the arrow of time does not exist. The irreversibility, the entropy, the running down, that is a feature of the collapsed classical world, not the ground from which the world arises. This means the physicist's one-way thermodynamic arrow, the one that makes dissolution feel like ending, operates only in the collapsed world, the conditioned world. The ground is prior to it. The ground is not the wave. The ground is the place from where the wave arises. Kalu Rinpoche's dissolution sequence moves in one direction. Earth, water, fire, air, space, consciousness, emptiness. Towards the uncollapsed ground. Toward pure potential. Toward the wave function before measurement. And I want to come back to this. The form we have now has a wave function on either side of it. Or better yet, the wave function itself links our current form to our next form, and so on. You can imagine a wave function between every jewel in the net of Indra. Emptiness is not the end of the wave function. Emptiness? It's what the wave function was always describing. Schrödinger pointed at what Tesla could not quite reach, a mathematical description of the ground from which all form arises. Now I want to say something very carefully. And I will say only as much as can be said online. Within the 6 yogas of Naropa, the very heart of the Kaju transmission, there exists a practice, a precise, extraordinary, protected practice, transmitted intact from Naropa to Milarepa to Gampopa, through the Karmapas, through Kalu Rinpoche, to the teachers that are alive today. I will not describe it fully. Some knowledge requires a living teacher and a prepared student, definitely the right conditions. Some things cannot be downloaded, cannot be Googled. The fact that such a transmission exists, protected, alive, intact, is itself part of what it points at. What I will say is this. The difference between a wave function collapsing randomly, karma pulling consciousness towards the next arising form by sheer habit of force, and a wave function collapsing with intention, with recognition, with the blessing of a lineage that has mapped this territory for 1,000 years. That difference is everything. The physicist measures the collapse from the outside. The practitioner dives in from the inside. My Lama knows the difference. Kala Rinpoche knew the difference. And their Lama, the great 16th Karmapa, he knew the difference for sure. 1,000 years of Kaju transmission exists precisely to pass that knowledge intact, living from mind to mind, to those who are ready. Correct teachings, a Sangha, and an authentic Lama with a lineage of teachers behind them are an invaluable thing to have on the way to your own quantum understanding. Go find a community today. Now, my Lama and his Lama have made wishes, something called the Bodhisattva commitment, to remain with their students life after life until all beings are liberated, to meet them again and again across many lifetimes. I will meet my Lama again and again. I know this, not as a consolation, as understanding of how reality works. Because the wishes have energy that cannot be destroyed. They move on the breath, the wind, the wave function. Because the Bodhisattva vow is not a sentiment, it's a quantum commitment. Once the connection between teacher and student is made, once the transmission has passed from mind to mind, that connection does not dissolve when the form dissolves. The entanglement persists across the breaking of the wave. And my buddy Misha, my brother in Dharma, we're entangled. The friendship was real. The practice was shared. The Dharma we sat with together left its impression in both of us. When what is real and unconditioned simply does not stop. Misha and I will meet again too. I feel this with the same certainty that I feel the ground beneath my feet. This is what quantum entanglement says about particles. Once connected, always correlated, across any distance, across any time. What Buddhism says about beings, once the connection is made in Dharma, it persists beyond the form that carried it. What a Lama says about his students, the wishes are not words, they're the mechanics of compassion, operating across lifetimes. Which is where we go next. If this episode reached something in you, if Misha's wave, or Kala Rinpoche's 8 words, or the image of a Lama's wishes stretching across lifetimes landed somewhere real, please give me a follow and a like. Share it with someone who might also need to hear it. That's how transmission moves, one jewel reflecting another, the net of Indra in action. And I'm so deeply grateful. So today we stood inside the arrow of time and felt it fully. We've explored what falls apart, entropy, Anicca, the arrow of time. We've explored what the dissolving reveals, the ground, the uncollapsed potential, the ocean beneath the wave. We've heard the second law and didn't look away. Sickness, old age, death, and loss. The thermodynamic reality of living in a form. We heard Kala Rinpoche, my Lama's Lama, say 8 words that contain the entire teaching. Because it is empty, it does not die. And the great 16th Karmapa's wisdom about death itself, as he was dying. We dissolved our form in meditation and felt the Lama dissolve into us, and understood that Laktong arises precisely in that space. Insight, the door that the dissolution opens. We remembered my good friend Misha, a yogi, a brother, a wave that arose from the ocean and returned to it, with tears and joy. We arrived at the edge of something physics is only beginning to name, that nothing truly connected is ever truly separate, that a Lama's wishes across lifetimes are not poetry, they're the physics of compassion. Next time on Quantum Awareness, interdependence and quantum entanglement. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. Ooh, and spent years trying to disprove it. The Buddha wouldn't have been surprised at all. We look at what it means that 2 particles, once connected, remain correlated across any distance, any time. We will look at the net of Indra once again, not as poetry, but as physics, and we'll ask the question that this entire series has been building towards. If separation was an illusion, What are we really? This is QP. Sound is emptiness. Emptiness is sound. Every question about consciousness is consciousness asking about itself. Catch you next time.